Salam. This is Joan. The Korean reading is Surah 40. It's spelled Ghafir, saying that it's God's name for forgiveness. When I looked it up on Google Translate, it said it was Gufra. It was spelled differently. The message is that Islam does give forgiveness, and then it's going to tell you how. Before I start, I'm going to read a prayer from verses 63 to 68. Allah, you have made earth a settlement, the sky a ceiling. You are a living God. And we see that when we practice Islam through Deen. We submit to your will. You alone originated life. So in this section, it speaks about angels and it describes behavior. In Islam, when you want forgiveness, and you know you've done something wrong, you just ask for forgiveness. You do your prayers, and you would protect other Muslims as a group of people. It describes that as an angel. And then it warns about idols, so you have to just make sure that that's not in your life. Also, it mentions that a believer is rewarded for their deeds. Then it talks about Judgment Day, and you'll know if you've been forgiven because there won't be any harm, that God is swift with his decision. Then it mentions threats, that if you threaten a Muslim, the same thing that is said to you might happen back to them. And we'll let you know what verses these are found in. Also, it says that once you teach Islam to a person of opposing beliefs, you're not supposed to show compassion, that Allah has contempt for atheism. But until then, you can teach them and show kindness. I believe I've covered everything. I'm just going to look over my notes real fast. We're saved through righteous behavior is verse 8. That Allah shows contempt to atheism is verse 10. That we have two deaths and two births. One is a physical one and the other is spiritual. That's in verse 11. Judgment is always given by Allah. That's verse 12. We're to be devoted to him. That's verse 13 through 14. There are also two laws. One is to warn the public, and the other one is to teach them the information in the Quran. That's verse 15. Belief being rewarded is in verse 17. That justice is quick is in the same verse. Allah knows what's hidden is in verse 19. He sees and hears, knows who we are through witnesses, verse 20. That even those who are wealthy or seem like a strong group of people will still be judged, as verse 21. We are to teach Islam by showing proofs, was in verse 22. And then the threatened information was in verse 28. If threatened, disbelief is threatened. Allah doesn't guide liars. Then verse 31, Allah doesn't harm his servants. Verse 33, Allah judges, none can guide those that oppose him, not to doubt him. Verse 34, just listen and receive guidance is verse 38. In verse 40, it says, if you do an evil deed, you receive it back, versus if you do a good deed, the same is returned to you. Verse 40. The warning about idols is verse 43. And then it just ends out this section by saying disbelievers are in total loss.